happened there was a person who lived just outside the town of Koznitz. And he was so poor that even the rats and the mice felt sorry for him. He had nothing in his house except for a wife and a bunch of kids, and a new one appeared every year, and they had nothing, no food, no tablecloth, no walls, no it was like
no cheese.
It was nothing. So one morning he woke up very early in the morning because it was freezing cold, because they had no heating, no money for coal, no nothing. And he suddenly remembered that today's Purim. So he fasted on Tanis Esther because he didn't have any money for food.
He always fast.
Right? So he figured he'll go to shul. Nothing else to do, The wife and the kids are asleep. The wife has finished shouting at him because there's no money in the house. So he creeps out and he goes to shul, and he arrives at the Kozditz of Magid's minyan. And he doesn't smell too good, and he doesn't look too good because he has no money for clothes and no money for perfume. You really don't know this story?
I don't remember.
So he goes into the back of the shul, hiding himself away, minding his own business. And he arrived just at the time for Kriyas and Megillah. So the Gabbai brings the Maggid of Koznitz, who's going to read the Megillah. And suddenly the Maggid says, just a second, we have a visitor. And he calls this guy from the back in the corner. He says, I need you to come up to the bimah and hold my Megillah whilst I'm learning Megillah's Esther. So the guy is not quite sure if he's woken up or he's still asleep. So then the Maggid says, listen, he hasn't had anything to eat today. So before we start the Megillah, you better bring him a schnapps and some cake. So they bring him kichun, and they bring him a schnapps, and he makes a l'chaim, and now he's head spinning anyway. So they read the Megillah. So after they read the Megillah, the Maggid gives him more schnapps and more kichun, and he says, you did very good. Where's my shlach monos? Excuse me? You didn't bring me shlach monos. Yeah, what? You have to go and bring me shlach monos. I don't want any excuses. Get on with it. But just remember...
Now I finally understand why in English they can't say mishloach manot.
Right.
Because they hear bring mishloach manos, they hear bring mishloach manos.
Okay. So the Maggid of Koznitz bangs on the table and says, Purim Hayom. Just remember, Purim Hayom. If you say every day Purim Hayom and you be b'simcha, everything will be fine. Go and get me shlach monos. Okay. So he walks out the shul, the Rebbe's honored him and given him up. So he's really in seventh heaven. He walks into a store that's selling cakes and biscuits and stuff, and he bangs on the counter, Purim Hayom. He says, listen, he says, I've got to go and give the Rebbe shlach monos. Fill me a bag of some nice pastries. I don't have a penny to my name, but I will come back one day and pay you. And if I don't, Purim Hayom. So the shopkeeper smiles. He says, here, take it, give it to the Rebbe. You pay me, you pay me. You don't pay me, you don't pay me. Oh! So now he walks into the next store, and it's selling wine. He says, I want 2 bottles of nice wine. Purim Hayom. He says, no, I don't have any money to pay you, but I may do. And when I do, I'll pay you. And if I don't, well, Purim Hayom. So the shopkeeper smiles and said, sure, it's Purim. You pay me, you pay me. You don't pay me, you don't pay me. So he goes back to the Maggid, and he's got for him 2 bottles of wine and a bag of cakes, and he says, I brought you shlach monos. So the Maggid says, oh, that's good. You did very, very good. He says, now remember, it's Purim Hayom, and if every day you say Purim Hayom and every day you be b'simcha, then everything is fine. Okay, so he goes out and he thinks to himself, oh, well and good. The Maggid called me up to listen to the learning, and I had some food in my stomach. What about the wife and the family starving? So he goes into the supermarket and he takes a trolley and he starts to fill it with everything he can see. Everything, whatever you could think of. Food, blankets, clothes, everything. Till he can barely push it. He goes up to the checkout desk, he calls the manager. He says, listen, it's Purim today, Purim Hayom. I haven't got a penny to my name. I haven't got any money to pay you. But one day I will have. And if I don't, well, it's Purim today, right? So the manager kissed a big smile and said, sure, it's Purim today. Go home and have a nice Purim. So he pushes this wagon that he can barely push, and he eventually gets to Tzrif at the end of the town. And as he comes in, he's screaming, Purim Hayom, Purim Sameach, Purim Hayom, Purim Sameach. His wife and kids wake up, and they're convinced that he's snapped it. He's got absolutely stark, staring, raving bonkers. He's become the president of the International Looney Society. And he starts to put all this food on the table with a tablecloth and starts to light the fire because now they've got some coal and they're all just can't believe it. They make brachas and they all sit down and they have a Purim feast like they've never heard before. And the Talmid Chacham, so he reads the Megillah for them and everything that you want. So they're sitting at the table and they're singing and they're dancing and they're having such a great time. And they're all singing Purim Hayom, Purim Hayom. And suddenly there's this thump at the door. Boom, boom, boom. Says, oh my God, it's the KGB. What the hell is it? I says, no, I recognize that knock. That's Ivan, the potato seller. There's a nice guy who lives down the road, and he comes here from time to time to sell me potatoes. Sometimes I have a penny or two. He doesn't argue too much about the price. I recognize the knock. So they open the door, and in falls Ivan. Both his legs are broken. Both his arms are broken. His face is covered in blood. He's been beaten up. His nose is broken. The guy looks as if, and he is on his last breaths. So they bring him in, they carry him in, put him in a chair, give him some of the vodka they bought, give him some food. They said to him, what the heck happened to you? So he says, I live in the house 2 or 3 doors down the road. Last night, my son, if you call him that, comes in and says, listen, I'm sick of this. I want to inherit this house. You're not dying. I want to get rid of you. And he starts to beat him black and blue. He says, okay, and when you're dead, I'll have the house. And he walks out. He says, I lost consciousness. And this morning I managed to crawl as far as here. He says, you guys took me in. And they made him feel a bit better. They comforted him. He says, that son of mine is not even a human being. He says, I see that you guys are true people. So I'm going to tell you a secret, because I'm not going to last much longer. If you come with me, carry me with me now to the forest outside the house. I'll show you a tree. And under the tree there's a big box. And in the box is all the money that's stashed away all these years, which I was going to give to my son. Now he can go to hell, and I'm giving it to you guys. So they carry him out, show him the tree, bring him back in, and he breathes his last. Boom. So in the morning, they arrange to get him buried. And then when it's all quiet, he goes out and he digs under the tree, and there's a gigantic treasure chest. Full of
potatoes.
Full of money. So he goes back to the Maggid of Kuznets, and he says, I guess this is all your money, like it's all. So the Maggid says, you keep the money. From now on, fortune will shine on you. But remember, you've got to say every day, Purim Hayom, because you've got to be besimcha every day. If you be besimcha, everything works out. And don't forget, every year you have to come back and give me shlachmonos. And Baruch Hashem, he became a big balstoker, rich guy. And that's it. That's because the Maggid says you've got to be besimcha. Purim Hayom!
We'll start tonight.
No, it's not. I went to shul today to get.
So I think that the Rav has a whole disc called Kol Yom Purim.
Yeah. Okay. Isn't it? Some guy argued with me because I went into shul to collect money, and I said Purim Hayom. He says it's not. It's tonight. I said, don't you dare argue with me. I said it's Purim today. You're a Kohen. You want to work in the base of Mikdash? You want to come into my mishmeret? You do what I say. It's Purim today. Guy went, okay, it's Purim today. Itamar, you know Itamar? Kohen with lots of kids. Darren's sometimes in the Beit Chabad and sometimes in Ramon Gimel.
Henkin? Henkin.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, where are we holding?
We're on the Tzadik Gimel. No, we're after that. We're Tzadik Gimel.
No.
A little bit after.
Zeo ki Avram lo yadanu.
Right. Zeo ki Avram lo yadanu. So yesterday we saw what it means that in the time when there's no base of Mikdash, and it started from the time of Esther and Mordechai, the Malchus, meaning actions, received directly from the Soviv. They receive directly from the light that surrounds all worlds. And they don't receive from Zah. And Zah means the emotional. Right? So the actions that we do, they're not laden with emotion, with midos. And they don't come down in a way that they can be revealed. Because again, midos, the main thing about midos is that you can see them. When a person feels a certain way, you can see it. But when it's entirely, you could call it cerebral, or you could call it that it's entirely egalitarian. Everybody uses and acts the same way, and it makes no difference if you think about this or you think about that. We gave the example of medicine. The medicine for the ancients was something very related to psychology, and then came along Descartes and severed the psyche from the body, and from then on, everybody's body is the same. We don't care. We're not going to look at the psyche. So these are all examples, I think, of what it means that Malchus is receiving directly from Chochmah Ilah. And that's what it means, Ki Avram lo yida'anu. And that's what it means that Abraham doesn't know us. What do you mean Abraham? Abraham is a chesed, right? So he doesn't know us. He doesn't give us. Abraham was one of the features of Zah, one of the features of the small continents. He doesn't know us. He's not the one who's giving us the divine energy. Ela שאחר כך בהתבוננות זו, כי אתה אבינו, יבוא מזה לאהבה ויראה בחינת פנים בפנים. So this is like the basis of Tanya, that by going back up to Hashem being our Father, and Hashem here meaning Chochmah Ilah, or going to, if you want, what we call meditating on God's greatness, that is what brings you to have feeling. That's what brings you to have face-to-face. But that means that the actions will be full of feeling only if you meditate on Hashem. It doesn't happen naturally, right? So the world, if you don't work on getting face-to-face with God, you won't experience any feeling in what you do. All you'll experience will be that you do it just rote. You do it just as a routine. רשפי יש התשוקה להווה אל עבדו, שהוא עניין נסירה להחזירה פנים בפנים, ואף מידות עד יום הכיפורים. So what does this have to do with Yom Kippurim? Because we said before...
Yom Kippurim?
Yeah, the whole idea is that before Yom Kippur, you have to come to this state. Okay? You have to come to this state through the Nesira. The Nesira is what happens during the first 10 days of the year, from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippurim. And Nesira means that, like when Adam and Eve were back to back, and then they were sawed in half, as it were, and then they could come face to face. So the same thing happens with a person until he reaches from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur. It says in the Gemara, where does it say this? In Sota, right? Where does it say this? Where does it say this? I forgot. We saw this earlier, didn't we? What we say?
I don't think so. Not in this moment.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I just don't remember. Suddenly I don't remember. Anyway, I think it's in Sota? Where is it? Where's this Mishnah?
Je ne reconnais pas.
Anyway, so it says in the Mishnah, the Yochanan, the high priest, he stopped people from saying, the Levim were saying, Ura lama tishan Hashem. In the second temple, right? So we had this question. In the second temple, they had this thing that one of their songs that they said over the sacrifices was, "Wake up, why do you sleep, God?" And what do they mean by God? God never sleeps. So they meant Zah. They meant what we call Kodesh Baruch Hu, this aspect of the emotions. It's only Zah that's asleep. But that doesn't mean that you have to be without emotion. It doesn't mean that you can't come to a state of loving God and fearing God. It just has to go directly through the bittul, through Chokhmah. וזהו כי נפלתי קמתי, פירוש בעת נפילה עצמה קמת. כי מקבלת מוחין שלא על ידי זע. And that's what it means when we say that the congregation of Israel has fallen and at the same moment gotten up. How does it work? Because the moment that it fell, it means that it's not receiving its life force from Zah, from the small countenance. But at that same moment, it immediately gets up and receives it through Chochmah Ilah. And so meditation brings you to feeling. It brings you to love and fear of God. It brings you to doing things with emotion. גם נפלה לא תוסיף קום, פירוש שאין יכול להיות קימה גדולה ביותר מן עת הנפילה. Meaning that there's no greater ascent than at the time of falling down. Why? Because you fall down from receiving your life force from one place, but at the same time, you're lifted, you're elevated to be able to receive your life force from a higher place. And that's sort of like what people say, that if you lose something, then another door is open. And so in this case. רק כי כוונת הבריאה היה על התגלות אלוקות, וזהו שלא בעת הגלות, כי אז הוא יותר התגלות נראה לעין. So when we're not in exile, when we're not without the base of Mikdash, that's the time when divinity is revealed more. But still, it's still revealed even in the time of, well, no, it's not revealed in the time of exile, but, so why does he say, in any case, I don't see I can't see the meaning of the Raki. כוונת הבריאה הייתה על התגלות אלוקות. He's saying that, well, we already know, so I don't understand the Raki. That that when the base of Mikdash was erected, that's when you had real revelation. Revelation again comes through the midos, through Zah. And when it's not, then you receive directly, so there's no revelation. It just appears in the action, but there's no ability to reveal it. וזה סוד הוויות הפוכות הנקראים ה' גבורות, אחור באחור, אבל שבאו סוד ה' חסדים מפרשים להון להיות פנים בפנים. So this is a statement I don't know what it means. Something in Kabbalah about when Havaya is written backwards. Instead of Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's written Hey Vav Hey Yud. And so that represents a state of Gvura instead of back to back, instead of Chesed, which is front to front, face to face. In any case, והאדם עצמו גם כן, הנפש החיונית חפצה בענייני העולם הזה, בחינת אחור ואחור. We see that in man himself, the life force, the soul of life, meaning the part of us that wants to live, the survival instinct, if you want. So what does it want? It wants things that are related to this world, money, and food, and shelter, and this, and that. And this is all back to back with Hashem. It's not face to face. Because we tend to think of the world as technical in that sense. You work, you get a salary, you do this, it's all supposed to be very impersonal.
One follows from the other.
Okay, impersonal. There's nothing to do with whether you're like this or like that. It's supposed to work. אבל בשכל, הרצון אל הוויה היא בבחינת נסירה פנים בפנים. But when it comes to the mind, here we understand that wanting to connect to God requires face to face. If you want to understand Torah, it's not enough to just have a strong understanding. You also have to daven, you also have to want, you have to be face to face with Hashem. But when it comes, but at the same time, בענייני העולם הזה צריך להיות הכל בבחינת אחוריים. ואפילו בענייני זיווג אמור הזל כאילו כפר שד, בכל שכן בשאר דברים. But the ideal, he says, when it comes to your material needs, is that they should be back to back. It is ideal. In other words, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that what I want physically doesn't depend on my personality. Right? It's not whether I'm a nice guy, so therefore I'll have something to eat or not. It's not related. But he says that's the way it should be. Because everything that's material, the person should be approaching as if he was back to back with it. Meaning impersonally. I have no personal interest in it, as it were. Whereas nothing can specifically, I want this, I want that. As long as I'm alive, it's fine. והנה פורים ויום כיפור בחד דרגה, הערת יסודה בנוקבה, והערתו יוצאת למטה לביאה. So Purim and Yom Kippur, they are at the same level. what does it mean? That in both of them, the Malchus, right, here in Yom Kippur, the Malchus is Yom Kippur itself. Because Yom Kippur itself is when the last part of the Nesira, the last part of the sawing occurs, and that's the Malchus of the crown. That's when it happens. And Purim is also the Malchus. So both of them receive directly from what we said, the foundation of Abba, from Chochmah Ilah. They both receive the same way. Because the sages said, it's interesting that they didn't give a source here, but the source is in Sanhedrin. About the Moadim, I don't remember where the source is. Maybe in Megillah even. That all the festivals will be annulled, apart from Purim and halachos. Halachos is a strange way to say that mitzvos won't be, meaning you'll still do the mitzvah, you'll still have the halacha, but it won't be a mitzvah. But Purim apparently will continue to be a mitzvah. כי נעדר ממשל הארי, שהוא מחיות טמאות, ומרכבה קדושה פני האריה אל הימין, מפני שמרוב מדרגתו הגבוה אין לו כלים במה להתלבש עדיין, אלא במקום היותר נמוך, והוא הבהמה הטמאה במקום הקליפות, מה שאין בתורה היה הכלי מתבטל מפני האור, וכמו כן הערת חוכמה אלה מוכרח להתלבש במקום היותר נמוך, דהיינו ענייני הלכות טמא, כשר וכולי, שהוא התגלות הרצון העליון שבחוכמה אלה בענייני זה העולם. So, what does he want to say here? That the reason that these two survive, Purim and Yom Kippur, is because they represent the lowest level to which Hashem's light comes down. Okay? What does it mean? It means that they have the strongest vessel. That the vessel on Yom Kippur and the vessel on Purim is strong enough to survive Hashem revealing Himself completely. That's their forte. All the other holidays won't be able to survive. Why won't they be able to survive? Because they already are at a high, call it spiritual level. And because they're at a high spiritual level, when Hashem reveals Himself completely, apparently the vessel will be completely annulled. There won't be any more strength for the vessel to contain. But by Purim and halachos, here he says halachos, not Yom Kippur, but he says halachos. These things create the strongest, lowest vessel. And because of that, this vessel will remain as something even when Hashem reveals Himself completely. And he gives an example from the lion, that the lion is the strongest. Why is he the strongest? Because he represents the holiness coming down to the lowest place. And the lowest place is always the strongest. It always has the most robustness. וזהו מרדכי יצא מלפני המלך. מרדכי is חוכמה אילה. יצא מבחינת מלכות. בלבוש מלכות הם עניינים גשמיים. ויעבור מרדכי כמובן בעץ חיים שהוא יוצא. So anyway, so Mordechai here is like Chochma, Ilah, and he's Yatza, meaning he gives out his foundation. Milifnei HaMelech, he gives it to the Malchus. And what does he come out with? He comes out Bilevush Malchut. And Levush Malchut, we said he has 6 garments, and these 6 garments that he's wearing, they correspond to now Malchus receiving the 6 midos, the 6 what do we call it, emotional faculties, receiving it directly from Mordechai. That's the idea behind it. Okay, that was the original mimer before this mimer. The mimer before this one is called Mordechai Yatzah Milifnei HaMelech. And this one is to explain more in depth really what he meant there. V'hinei ktiv, Ototeinu lo reinu, ein od navi v'lo itanu yodei ad ma. It says in Tehillim that we haven't seen our signs, we have no more prophet, and there's no one who knows unto when. שבזמן הגלות על הרוב כל הניסים הנפלאות נעשים דרך הטבע. What does this mean? Ototeinu lo reinu, we haven't seen our signs. Our signs are actually the miracles. So we haven't seen our signs, we haven't seen miracles. There's no more a prophet, and nobody knows till when the exile will continue. What happens? Like we said, there's no revealed miracles. There can't be any revealed miracles, because revealed miracles occurred when Malchus received directly from Zah. And because Zah, again, is the midos and the emotional faculties, and they are always expressive, so when Zah gave them over to Malchus, they shone in the world. You saw it. For example, כמו אצל אחשוורוש שלא היה דבר נראה לעין שהוא למעלה מהטבע, רק על ידי אהבת אסתר. So we see this, the first strong example of this, the only book maybe of the entire Tanakh that doesn't describe any kind of special miracle or something like that. Okay? Even by Ruth, there were some miracles that happened there. Or at least it was very clear that it was a miracle. But by Esther, there's nothing
special.
Nothing special. It's just politics as usual. ומכל מקום נראה בחוש שכל הסיבות היו רק למעלה מהטבע. But still, when you read the Megillah, you feel that the reasons for everything that happened were higher than nature. They weren't natural. They were supernatural. והוא שהנס נשתלשל ובא על דרך הטבע. The reason for this is that the miracles came down and they engarbed themselves. They shone through nature, not through some supernatural event. Why? מפני כי כשהיו המידות עליונות מאירים פנים בפנים, היו התגלות המידות עליונות בביאה, כמו שכתוב מוליך לימין משה. Because when there was a face-to-face, and face-to-face, as we said, was only when Zah was receiving, the small contents was receiving, then there was a revelation, like we said, because those are the midos that shine outwards. And so they shone outwards even in the worlds of creation, formation, and action. And you could see the miracle. And this is called like molich limin Moshe. The Moshe moves things to the right. The idea here is that he like moves them out to the right. So Moshe is like an example. He's Netzach, and he's one example of how the midos appear. And that's why during the time of the first temple there were prophets. Because what was a prophet? A prophet was somebody who received from Zah, he was like in Malchus, he himself, but he was receiving from Zah, and whatever he was receiving was revealed to him, because Zah reveals, and as opposed to Malchus, which doesn't reveal. So that was what allowed there to be prophets. נצח ועודם תראה בלגי גופה, כליות יועצות, מבשלי הזרע, האחתי ים שחם מבחינת יסוד כידוע. והם לבר מגופה. פירוש שאינם מעצמות הגוף שהם מידות חסד וגבורה, רק שלוחים לשלוח דבר מפניהם, והוא עניין נביאים, כשנסתלקו המידות נשאר הערה ממקום יסודה, וצריך להתלבש בדברים תחתונים מפי הטבע, שהוא בחינת אלוקים, גימטרי הטבע. So what's the idea about a prophet? The prophet is part, he really, even though he himself is in Malchus, but he's receiving from Netzach and Hod. That's how it's described, that all the Nevi'im are receiving from Netzach and Hod, from victory and acknowledgement. The fourth and the fifth Midah, right, between the six Midos. And they, even though they're, again, so they receive something revealed. But once they couldn't receive it anymore from Zah, so even if a person was ready to be a prophet, there was nothing to see, there was nothing to hear, there was nothing to connect with above, there was no way to see anything. You had to find a different way. So what's the way, by the way? The way is Chokhmah. And that's the meaning of Chacham Adif Min Navi. Because now that there's no Nevuah, it's actually better for the Chacham, for the wise man, to receive sustenance from above directly through his wisdom, directly through what we call here Chokhmah. But the result is that whatever sustenance is received, whatever life force is received, it goes out through nature. You can't see it as something special. So the sages, there's no miracles in their time. They describe miracles, but nobody could see these miracles. It's an important thing. That's what comes out here. What comes out. So even when the sages describe that they did such and such a miracle, or this and this happened to them, and so on, from what I understand from what he says, you, as a regular person coming to see what happened, you wouldn't see anything. You would see like what you just described with Ivan. Okay? Ivan came, and there's natural things that happen, and kids are stupid, and this guy's kid was even stupider, and who knows if he was even his son, who knows. And instead of inheriting him, he gave all his money to this family. So that's what it means. It's a miracle. Obviously, it's a miracle, because otherwise we wouldn't tell the story. But it's entirely in the Teva. So if you came to see the miracle by the Koznitzer, you would be very disappointed, because you never see an overt miracle. Whereas in the time of the prophets, there were overt miracles. You could see them. But still, you understand from the story that something special happened here. But I can't see it. I can't discern it. So now we have to. So this ties into Esther being completely independent from Mordechai. What? Solo. She does things by herself. Why? Because we just said that Esther needs to receive, we would think that you would receive from Yesod Abba, from Mordechai. That's what he said before. Sorry, I said that wrong. Mordechai is Chochmah Ilah. So we said that during the exile, Malchus, Esther, receives directly from Mordechai. So why is it that she was able to do things without Mordechai? The main part of the Megillah, where the real action, the real resolution occurs, or the tension, I don't know, maybe the highest point of tension with when Esther invites Haman second time to a feast, to a banquet. That she did without consulting Mordechai. She did it all on her own. So what's going on? Is she receiving from Chochmah Ilah, from Mordechai, or not? היות רחל עקרת הבית, כל ענייני הנהגת העולם שייך אצלה. ובעלה מרדכי יסוד האבא, שלקחה לו לבד, בטח לבעלה, שבוודאי לא תעשה שלא כהוגן, חס ושלום. So I think what he's saying here is that Mordechai really represents both things. He's Yesod Abba and he's Chochmah Ilah. He's both these things. There's a time when Yesod Abba, when the foundation of Abba, gives directly to Malchus. It's what we call Abba Yasad Brata. That the father founded the daughter. So that's what it means. He took her for her daughter. He didn't marry her, according to the Pshat. He took her as a daughter. He adopted her. What does it mean to adopt her? That he now gives to her directly. And now you need to understand, this is the Chiddush, that Batach Balei Bala, that he trusts her, even though here he calls her Bala. He's like her, married to her. So because of that, I guess the sages say that they were married. But the Pshat is just that he took her as a daughter, just like Abba Yasad Brata, that the father founds the daughter. And that's what we mean when we say that in the time of the exile, Hashem trusts us to do what's needed. He trusts us. In other words, he places the burden on us. So that's why she had the insight to make two feasts, because the whole point was to bring Haman closer and closer to holiness, to her. And then, the moment he came closer and closer to holiness, he fell down by himself. He was vanquished just from coming too close to holiness. It wasn't much needed to do to him. Because the only time that the impure husks can be independent and can be able to sustain themselves is if they're not close to holiness. Because the moment they're close to holiness, they lose their sense of separateness. The holiness is the opposite of being separate. To be holy means to be one with God. So the moment they come close to that, they thrive off of feeling separate. So that's destroyed for them. And the closer that he comes to holiness, he nullifies, just as wax melts before fire. ולכן קרבה את המן בתכלית הקירוב להושיב בסעודות המלך מהמלכה, כמאמר הז"ל, כי אריה והרייתא קיימי ואי למאן דעבר בעיניו. So she brought him into a intimate seuda, intimate banquet that she had with Achashverosh. And that's like the king and the queen together. It's like the lion and the lioness. It's described in a lot of ways. Here I think this is from the Zohar. Here it is. And then there's a holy name even that comes out of their coupling. And in the Zohar it says that it's the end. It'll be the end of the person who comes and gets in between the lion and the lioness when they're mating. And it's the end of his life. So the same thing happened here. But then she saw that he survived the first Seuda, the first banquet. She had to make a second banquet, and again, lead Haman too close, until eventually he loses it. וזהו יבוא המלך והמן היום, כי גלו לבבל שכינה עמהם, והייתה בו בגלות, ואסתר יקר את הבית בקדושה, על פי פשט, וכתובות אמר על תקווה, there's a lot of points here. Let me remember if there's anything more here. No.
Why didn't anything happen to him at the first banquet?
Apparently he wasn't yet close enough. He didn't think enough yet about what great power he would receive from this, or whatever. He didn't think to, or wasn't able, or wasn't sure what her intention was. But then the second time that she brought him, it created more anticipation that this was for something very good. So I think he acted promiscuously with them, not necessarily sexually, but he acted like he's their friend or something, and that's what got him in trouble. Until finally he was killed. He was hung because he fell on her bed. He felt so close to them that he could act like openly, and that was his undoing. So I think that the first time he just didn't feel comfortable yet. He wasn't sure yet what his position was. But the second time he already felt like he was the most important advisor. So he's very open with them. I don't know. Makes sense. I think a lot of things come out of this mimer.
Why'd you get up so early?
I have to eat before the fast.
Yeah, okay.
I tried staying up. I stayed up till 1:30.
Okay.
And then I got up at 4.
What did you eat? Steak and chips?
Yeah. That's what I eat every day. I ate my oatmeal.
Okay. Baruch Hashem.
So now we can go into Purim, knowing that in Purim, the point is to have everything appear in nature. Yeah. You don't do, it's very interesting, you don't sit and meditate holiness. You just sit and you drink and you laugh with people.
Baruch Hashem.
And the Ruach HaKodesh comes from that. From something very menial, seemingly even vulgar. It's like a beer hall. And yet, that's what it looks like on the outside. It looks the most, that the miracles are contained completely within nature. Say though.
All right. Shikach Gadol.